The first time I realized something was seriously wrong, my dog was dragging himself across my backyard like he was trying not to scare me. That's the part that still gets me. Not the lawsuit threats, not the dead lawns, not even the county inspectors parked outside our neighborhood for 3 straight days. It was the way Duke looked at me that afternoon, confused, shaking, foam hanging from the side of his mouth, while his legs kept giving out underneath him like his body had suddenly forgotten how to work. And the crazy part is, about 6 hours earlier, the people responsible for it had been outside smiling at everybody like they were hosting some kind of suburban garden parade. I live in a neighborhood outside Raleigh called Maple Ridge Estates, one of those HOA communities where people care more about grass than marriage vows. Every mailbox matches, every fence has regulations, and every month somebody gets fined because their trash can sat outside 20 minutes too long. I never really fit in there. My yard was patchy, little dry spots here and there, clover popping up whenever it wanted. Didn't bother me none. I'm a contractor. I work with my hands all day. Last thing I care about after 10 hours in the heat is whether my lawn looks like a golf course. But my neighbor across the greenbelt, Celeste Mercer, she treated grass like religion. Celeste was president of the HOA, late 50s maybe, always dressed like she was heading to a country club fundraiser, even if she was just checking mail. She had this way of smiling at you without actually being nice, like every conversation was secretly a warning. And for months, she'd been obsessed with this new eco-conscious beautification initiative the HOA board approved. That's what they called it anyway. Basically, they hired some landscaping company called Greensphere Environmental to make the neighborhood lawns healthier and more sustainable. Yard signs everywhere, little slogans talking about protecting families, pets, pollinators, all that polished fake corporate language people use when they want you to stop asking questions. Duke loved running along the fence line behind my house because squirrels nested in the oak trees near the HOA common area. Every morning he'd patrol like it was his personal security route. Golden Retriever, 10 years old, sweetest dog I ever owned. Got me through my divorce, through my dad dying, through those nights where the house feels too quiet and you start hearing your own thoughts louder than you want to. So when I found him stumbling near the back gate that Tuesday afternoon, I panicked immediately. I threw him into my truck so fast I forgot my wallet on the kitchen counter. The vet clinic was 20 minutes away, and the whole drive Duke kept twitching in the passenger seat while I talked to him like somehow my voice alone could hold him here. Stay with me, buddy. Come on now, stay with me. Dr. Perez met me outside before I even parked straight. They rushed Duke in the back while I stood there smelling antiseptic and wet tile, feeling completely useless. About 40 minutes later, she came out still wearing gloves, and I could tell from her face before she even opened her mouth. It looks like toxic chemical exposure, she said quietly. Most likely herbicide poisoning. High concentration. I remember staring at her like the words didn't connect right away. Herbicide. Duke didn't eat random stuff. He barely touched table scraps unless I handed them to him. Then it hit me all at once. That morning he'd been running the fence line near the HOA lawn crews. Dr. Perez asked if any nearby properties had recently been treated. I actually laughed a little when she said that, because I remembered those ridiculous green signs staked all over the common areas. Safe for children. Safe for pets. Safe for the environment. Yeah, safe. Duke stayed overnight at the clinic. I didn't sleep at all. Around 3 in the morning, I sat on my back porch staring toward the greenbelt, and for the first time since moving into Maple Ridge, I noticed how unnaturally perfect those lawns looked. Not a single weed. Not one brown patch. Just this bright artificial green glowing under the neighborhood lights like plastic. The next morning, I walked the property line wearing work gloves and carrying a shovel and freezer bags like some exhausted suburban detective. Near the fence, right where Duke usually chased squirrels, I noticed this weird chemical smell underneath the fresh-cut grass scent. Sharp, almost metallic. And taped right beside the HOA announcement board was a giant smiling sign from Greensphere Environmental. 100% organic lawn renewal program. I just stood there staring at it while my hands shook. Because deep down, I already knew somebody was lying. I wish I could tell you I handled everything calmly after that, but honestly, I was furious in a way that felt physical, like my whole body was vibrating all the time. Duke was still at the clinic hooked up to fluids when I drove across town to a soil testing lab a buddy of mine used years ago during a construction dispute. Tiny little place tucked behind an industrial warehouse, looked half abandoned from the outside. The technician there, this older guy named Leonard with nicotine-stained fingers and reading glasses held together by tape, dumped my sample onto a tray and frowned before he even ran anything. "That ain't organic," he muttered. 2 days later, he called me back personally, said I needed to come in. The report showed traces of triclopyr and dicamba, commercial-grade concentrations too, way above residential recommendations. Stuff restricted in a lot of neighborhoods because runoff contaminates drainage systems and pets absorb it through their paws. Leonard looked me dead in the eye and said, "Whoever applied this either cut corners or thought nobody would test it." And that right there, that sentence changed everything for me. Because now it wasn't an accident anymore. It was negligence wrapped in marketing. I emailed the report directly to the HOA board that afternoon. Attached vet records too. I kept it respectful, probably more respectful than they deserved. Told them my dog nearly died, and somebody needed to explain why banned chemicals were being used near residential properties. 3 hours later, Celeste finally called me. I still remember standing in my kitchen watching rain hit the back deck while she talked to me in that smooth, fake neighborhood politician voice. "Ethan, we understand you're upset," she said, dragging out the word upset like I was overreacting about a parking ticket instead of a poisoned dog. "But Greensphere assured us all treatments are compliant. My dog almost died." Well, animals do get into things. That silence after she said it, man, I can still feel it in my chest. I asked if she even read the lab report. She sighed loud enough for me to hear irritation through the phone. "Honestly, Ethan, threatening the HOA over one independent test isn't productive." Threatening. That word stuck with me. Not concern. Not apology. Threatening. Like I was the problem now. I hung up before I said something stupid. Later that night, my next-door neighbor Ron came over carrying beer and acting nervous. Ron was retired military, quiet guy, always trimming hedges at exactly 7 in the morning like he was still following orders from somebody. He leaned against my porch rail and lowered his voice. "You didn't hear this from me," he said, "but Greensphere got rejected by 2 nearby counties last year after runoff complaints. Apparently, Celeste pushed hard to hire them anyway because they were cheap and promised championship-level lawns." Ron shook his head and looked toward the greenbelt. "That woman would spray nuclear waste if it kept crabgrass away." We both laughed a little at that, but there wasn't much humor in it. Duke came home 3 days later weaker than I'd ever seen him. He could barely climb onto the couch by himself. That messed me up more than I expected. Dogs don't understand betrayal. He didn't know the place he loved running through almost killed him. He still wagged his tail every time I opened the back door. For the next week, I watched landscaping crews continue spraying around the neighborhood like nothing happened. Kids riding bikes nearby. People walking strollers. One afternoon, I even saw Celeste outside bragging to a group of homeowners about how Maple Ridge had the healthiest lawns in the county. I swear, hearing that nearly pushed me over the edge. But revenge born out of pure anger is messy, sloppy, temporary. What happened next came from something colder. About a week later, I was out fixing drainage near my shed when I noticed sections of my own yard had this strange root decay under the soil. Brown slime around the base layer. I recognized it immediately because years ago I worked landscaping before construction. Phytophthora, nasty fungal pathogen, loves overwatered chemically dependent lawns. Once it spreads deep enough, the roots basically suffocate underground while the surface still looks healthy for days. Then everything collapses at once. Back then, an old groundskeeper taught me how golf courses spent thousands trying to stop outbreaks. I remember kneeling there in the dirt, staring at those infected roots, while something ugly slowly formed in the back of my mind. And here's the thing I know some people watching this are going to debate. I didn't decide right then to destroy their lawns. Not exactly. First, I tried going through proper channels. I filed complaints with the county environmental office, sent the lab reports, vet bills, photos. Nobody moved fast. Bureaucracy takes forever unless rich people start complaining publicly. Meanwhile, Greensphere kept spraying. Then came the HOA meeting. God, that meeting. Community clubhouse packed wall to wall, with people drinking coffee from little paper cups, while Celeste stood near a projector talking about seasonal lawn optimization. I waited until the end before speaking up. I showed everyone Duke's medical records. Showed the chemical report. For maybe 5 seconds the room actually went quiet. Then Celeste smiled. Smiled. "We sympathize with Mr. Cole's unfortunate pet situation," she said. but there's no evidence linking Greensphere directly to the incident. Unfortunate pet situation. Like Duke was a broken lawn chair. One guy in the back actually nodded along with her. Another woman whispered something about people trying to scam the HOA. I stood there feeling heat crawl up my neck, while Celeste continued talking about community reputation and property values. Property values. My dog nearly dies, and these people are worried about curb appeal. That was the moment something changed in me permanently. Not rage. Clarity. Because I realized Maple Ridge didn't care about truth. They cared about appearances. About preserving this fake polished image no matter what got buried underneath it. Funny enough, that became the exact weakness I used against them. A few days later, I drove 2 counties over to visit someone I hadn't seen in years, an old soil specialist named Walter Boone. Guy lived alone in a weather-beaten farmhouse surrounded by dying peach trees and rusted equipment. Walter knew more about turf disease than anybody I ever met. We sat on his porch drinking burnt coffee while cicadas screamed in the trees. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, just rocking slowly in his chair. Finally, he said, "Perfect lawns are fragile, Ethan. Most folks don't realize that. The prettier they look, the weaker they usually are underneath." Then he looked at me for a long second and asked quietly, "You planning to teach somebody a lesson?" I should have lied. Instead, I just stared out at the fields. Walter disappeared into his shed for maybe 20 minutes and came back carrying a small insulated container. "Phytophthora culture," he said. "Concentrated." I looked at him. "You're serious? You didn't get this from me." He handed it over slowly. "And Ethan, once this starts spreading through an irrigated root system, there ain't much stopping it." Driving home that night, the container sat on the passenger seat beside me the whole way like a loaded weapon. And for the first time since Duke got sick, I felt calm. I didn't do anything right away. That's probably the part people won't believe, but it's true. The container sat sealed in my garage for almost 4 days while I kept going back and forth with myself like some exhausted jury arguing inside my own head. Every time I looked at Duke sleeping by the couch with his front paw twitching in his dreams, I'd feel that anger rise back up. Then I'd picture kids playing in the neighborhood, families who had nothing to do with any of this, and I'd think maybe I should let the county handle it. But then another landscaping truck would roll through Maple Ridge spraying mystery chemicals beside storm drains, while Celeste strutted around talking about sustainability like she was saving the planet one blade of grass at a time. And eventually I realized something ugly but honest. People like that only stop when consequences become impossible to ignore. So one humid Thursday night around midnight, I got to work. No dramatic movie montage, no black hoodie nonsense. Just me in old work boots carrying irrigation tubing and a battery drill while the neighborhood sat quiet under porch lights. The common greenbelt behind my property had a runoff channel connected to the HOA sprinkler network. I knew because I helped repair part of the drainage system during a flood 2 years earlier. The design was sloppy, cheap. Water pooled along the fence line before feeding back into the irrigation reservoir underneath the maintenance shed. All I did was create a few shallow feed points near the runoff edge and introduce the culture slowly through a low-pressure drip line. That's it. No stepping onto HOA property. No damaged equipment. Nature handled the rest. The first signs showed up about 10 days later. Tiny yellow patches scattered across the central lawn near the clubhouse. Most people ignored it at first. Lawns get dry spots sometimes. Then the circles widened. Grass turned this sick muddy brown and started collapsing inward like rot spreading through fruit. By week 3, the place looked cursed. I'm serious. Huge dead rings stretched across the once perfect greenbelt, wet mush under the surface. This sour, earthy smell hanging in the air every morning. Landscapers kept showing up throwing everything at it. Fungicides, reseeding, extra watering, which honestly made it worse because Phytophthora loves moisture. Watching them accidentally feed the infection was almost surreal. One morning I sat on my porch drinking coffee while 3 HOA board members stood ankle-deep in dying turf arguing with a landscaping supervisor who looked ready to quit on the spot. "It's spreading underground," the guy kept saying. "I don't know what you want me to do." Meanwhile, neighborhood Facebook groups exploded into chaos. People blamed grubs, toxic mold, sabotage. One woman claimed it was caused by 5G towers, which honestly might have been the funniest thing I'd heard all month. Then somebody posted drone photos comparing the lawns from just 6 weeks earlier. The difference looked apocalyptic. Maple Ridge went from country club brochure to abandoned golf course almost overnight. And Celeste, man, watching Celeste unravel was something else. She stopped waving at people, stopped wearing those bright pastel outfits. Every time I saw her outside, she looked exhausted, snapping at contractors, pacing with her phone glued to her ear. Then one afternoon, she stormed directly up my driveway. Didn't knock either. Just marched straight toward me while I was changing oil in my truck. "You've been smiling an awful lot lately," she said. "No hello. No small talk." Her voice sounded shaky under the anger. I wiped my hands with a rag and looked at her. Should I not smile on my own property? "Don't play games with me, Ethan." She stepped closer. Something was introduced into those lawns. I shrugged. "Maybe your miracle landscaping company screwed up again." Her eyes narrowed hard. "You think this is funny?" And right there, for half a second, I almost told her. Not because I wanted credit, but because I wanted her to finally feel uncertainty. Fear. The same helpless feeling I had sitting in that vet clinic wondering if Duke was going to make it through the night. But instead I leaned against my truck and said calmly, "What I think is funny is hearing the counties asking questions about banned herbicides after a dog poisoning." Her entire face changed. It was subtle, but I saw it. That tiny flicker of panic. 2 days later, county inspectors arrived. Not one vehicle either. 4 of them. White trucks parked outside the clubhouse while environmental officers walked the grounds collecting soil and water samples. Turns out my complaints finally gained traction once half the neighborhood started threatening legal action over contaminated runoff and collapsing property values. Funny how fast officials move once rich homeowners get nervous. The investigation lasted almost a week. Greensphere denied everything at first, naturally. Then records surfaced showing unauthorized chemical purchases through a third-party supplier. Somebody inside the company had been mixing commercial herbicides into organic treatments to keep lawns unnaturally green longer. The county hit the HOA with massive fines for environmental violations and failure to disclose hazardous applications. Greensphere lost multiple contracts across the state. Last I heard, they were tangled in lawsuits. And Celeste, she resigned before the emergency board vote even finished. Never said goodbye to anybody. Just vanished from Maple Ridge completely about a month later. Here's where the story gets messy, though. Because people always want revenge stories wrapped up neatly with a little moral lesson at the end. Real life doesn't work like that. A few homeowners got caught in the fallout unfairly. Some lawns had to be ripped out entirely. Property values dipped for almost a year. One older couple down the street lost a landscaping award they genuinely cared about. And yeah, sometimes late at night, I still wonder if I crossed a line. Maybe I did. But I also know this. Duke's alive. The county banned Greensphere from operating in residential zones after the investigation. And Maple Ridge finally switched to actual organic lawn care monitored by independent testing. About 3 weeks after the inspectors left, an attorney representing the HOA showed up at my house with settlement paperwork. Quiet little guy, looked exhausted beyond belief. The HOA agreed to cover Duke's veterinary bills plus additional compensation if I signed a liability waiver and agreed not to pursue civil litigation. I asked him one question before signing. Did they ever admit what happened? The attorney paused for a second too long. Then he said softly, "Off the record, yes." That was enough for me. These days, the greenbelt behind my house still hasn't fully recovered. Some mornings when the sun hits it just right, you can still see faint dead rings underneath the new grass like scars buried under skin. Duke's older now, slower too, but every once in a while he still chases squirrels along that same fence line, tail wagging like none of this ever happened. And honestly, maybe that's the part one think about most. Because people online love talking about revenge like it fixes something deep inside you. Truth is, it doesn't. It just shifts the weight around. So now I'm curious what you think. Did Celeste and the HOA get exactly what they deserved? Or did I become just another neighbor willing to poison something to win? Let me know in the comments, because even now, I'm still not completely sure myself.